wanting to know more and more about their bees, and specifically the Waggle dance, which is probably their most famous form of communication, and one that I'm just going to indulge in enthusiastically talking about, because it is my favourite one, both to talk about and also to emulate on the dance floor. So I'm sure many of you are aware, but I'm just going to go over it for those of you who might be fortunate enough to be discovering this piece of information for the first time. I know that when I first found out about this, I was absolutely mind blown that allegedly quite simple, turns out not so simple, animals are capable of communicating information like this. So if a foraging honeybee finds a particularly rich, a particularly useful resource, by that I mean food, she will return to her sisters in her colony, and she needs to tell them where that food is. She does this by dancing upwards along the honeycomb frame at an angle that represents the angle the bees must follow between the colony and the sun in order to get to that food source. What's really amazing, some of you might be able to read this in the bottom right-hand corner there, is that she can do this for hours and hours and hours, relying on the fact that that food source was rich enough and dense enough and available enough that she really needs to recruit as many sisters to it as possible, is that as the day moves on and as the sun moves across the sky, which she can't see because she's inside the colony, it's pitch black, she will internally keep track of that and will slowly move her angle of dance, even within the colony, to mimic the movement of the sun across the sky. So not only are they able to say the sun was here, we're here, you need to fly in that direction, as the sun changes with the day, without her even perceiving that, she is able to mentally adjust the directions she's giving to her sisters in order to ensure that the instructions as to where to find this flower patch remain accurate. And I just think that's actually quite remarkable. I barely have the ability to communicate information that well, let alone something with a brain the size of a pinhead. She doesn't need only to tell them what direction to fly, but she needs to tell them how far to fly. For a long time, we thought it was the distance along this Waggle section of the dance here, but it actually turns out it's the amount of time she spends on that section. So apologies for this being in kilometers, but the conversion just works too well, where for every 1 second she spends doing the straight directed Waggle portion of the dance, that corresponds to 1 kilometer distance. That's about 5/8 of a mile. For those of you who aren't kilometer literate, don't worry, in Britain we still use miles as well. So it took me a long time to learn what that meant. And even more than just demonstrating how far they need to fly, the enthusiasm and the energy in which she expresses in that Waggle portion of the dance directly correlates to how valuable and how rich a floral resource she's communicating. So the bigger the flower patch that she finds, the more vigorously she waggles. The amount of time she spends waggling tells her sisters how far to fly, and the direction she's dancing vertically on the honeycomb of the frame tells them what direction to fly, and she's able to do all of that inside a pitch dark colony, adjusting for the movement of the sun across the sky as she does so. And I think we can all agree that's just a fantastic behavior. That's an amazing thing for an animal to be able to do. And the discovery of this phenomenon is what earned these three gentlemen a joint Nobel Prize back in 1973. And I'm sure if any of them were around now, they'd be able to thank their honeybee chargers and their love of beekeeping for giving them such a coveted scientific medal. Even though this is quite old information, we're still using it in really exciting new ways to understand what our bees are doing out in the landscape and to learn from them and what priorities they need.